Hey, everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. We're going to be going over a topic that we appear to be discussing with increasing frequency, the disappearing of people on our shores. What's happening? We've heard about this in many other countries, but everybody said it could not happen here in the United States of America, but it is happening in the United States of America. We had Mahmoud Khalil's, a member of his legal team, on with us just a couple of days ago. We said, what happened? He was in the lobby of his apartment building. This gentle young man, Palestinian advocate, but he's also an Israeli advocate. He said, look, we've got to have peace and we can coexist. But that said, he is also an advocate for the Palestinian people for a ceasefire. And his wife, who is due to give birth any day now, they were walking in their home and they were just grabbed out of the lobby. People who were masked, they did not identify themselves. Let's just keep on going with that. It was most frightening. And he was not taken to a prison in New York or New Jersey, but to a mega prison in Louisiana, where he is in a room with 50, 60, 70, 80 people in bunk beds. And for more than a day, we all wanted to know, where is he? Now we have this mega prison in El Salvador, where so-called gangs are being taken. But there's a gentleman who's married to an American citizen. An American citizen. He's a father. He's a husband. He was taken accidentally, now our government says, to El Salvador. Now, mind you, the United States is paying El Salvador to house these persons, and the president of El Salvador just met with our president at Mar-a-Lago just days ago. Now, they called it a clerical error, but the vice president is saying, no, he's a member of a gang, and so he deserves to be there. The fear is that he will be persecuted and or worse. It appears there is no recourse. What is going on, everybody? Let's look into this case. We need to know why this father was sent to a prison in his home country, his country of origin. He lives in the United States now. This is his home country now. And his home is in the Americas. If you want to be very specific, he's indigenous to this area, this part of the world. So what is going on? Why was he removed? Why? How is this happening in the United States of America today? Why? Kilmar Abrejo Garcia has been removed. He's been disappeared. Where is he? In El Salvador. Have we seen him? His wife had to see him on some video. She said, there he is. Is that how we're supposed to do this? We've got immigration attorney from the Haitian American Lawyers Association of Illinois, attorney Anastasia Sanat with us. We've got attorney Mark Fancher. Brilliant attorney, brilliant civil libertarian. I need him to explain this. And we have got someone new to the family today, someone whose work I have admired for a long time, have a special place in my heart for everyone who's in Washington, D.C., being a Howardite. But of course, he's the director of the Center for Latin American and Latino Studies at American University. Brilliant sociologist, Professor Ernesto Castaneda. And we're so excited that you are with us today. Why don't we let you start things off, Professor Castaneda? What is happening here? Because this happened in your area, and as we know in the DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia, that's government territory. So it's white hot. We understand that. But you got to help me to understand. I mean, what happened? How was he picked up and then taken to El Salvador? They're calling it an error, and yet our government is saying we can't bring him back. What?
Yeah, no, exactly, Santita. This is something worrisome. I'm glad we're talking about it today because it should worry every American citizen, and the whole world is watching. The world is following these news stories very closely, and they know that that's not the America of the rule of law, and the America that we have prided ourselves to be, and compare ourselves to as better than other countries. We're ended in a period of lawlessness, where whatever the president says goes, regardless of what the laws are in the books. So in this case in particular, unfortunately, is one of many. I will tell you a couple more similar examples. But this is within the larger context of this campaign promise, one of the few ones that President Trump is staying close to, about these mass deportations. Mass deportations, as the experts have been saying for a while, are really hard to do, are very expensive. Why? Because people have stopped coming at the border. The border is really militarized. The border wall has been constructed. Mexico has boots on the ground. The US has boots on the ground. It's very hard for people to come undocumented these days. Also, the Trump administration has ended asylum seeking at the border. So, contrary to the numbers that we saw of Haitians, Venezuelans, Colombians getting in line, going through a process, CBP1, or asking for asylum, or being paroled, or given TPS to enter legally into the country, as we saw under the Biden administration, and many of those people were then deported. That's why the deportation numbers or removals were really high with the Biden administration. Obama removed a lot of people, but now that there's almost nobody coming at the border, Trump wants to fulfill this promise of removing people. But who are they going to remove? Immigrants are in our communities everywhere. They own businesses. They may have a degree. They work with citizens. So it's very hard, except for racial profiling, but you're going to get a lot of citizens in those raids. It's very hard to distinguish who are immigrants. And if you do a raid in the South, in a poultry factory, in the milk industry, you're going to affect those local economies, and you're going to affect those business owners that may vote Republican. So what we are seeing now is that the Trump administration is going for the low hanging fruit in order to get a quota for deportations. And that's what agents are doing. So they're going for people that they can locate easily, people that they have in the databases as people asking for asylum, as people under TPS. So it happens to be a lot of Venezuelans, Salvadorians, Haitians, Cubans, and others. So in the concrete case of the DMV, it's a very diverse area. The area is doing very well, but because it's so close to Washington, as you were saying, Santita, they were also trying to install fear in the communities, and they have done raids in Arlington, Virginia, one of the safest communities in the U.S. They're trying to bring crime down, as they say. They did something in Woodbridge, Virginia, the other day, and in Maryland. So what they have been doing is that anybody that looks foreign, brown, black, that may have a tattoo, they
In
are
other words,
stopping them.
everybody on this panel.
Yes, exactly. So we could all be profiled if you're jogging on the weekend and we don't have our ID with us. And in this case of many of these men, they happen to have tattoos. Michael Jordan, a crown, the name of the mother, a name of a daughter. And that has been used by ICE authorities and local authorities to say that if you have a crown or other tattoos that they have in a list that they made up, that you are a member of the Tren de Aragua, this criminal group based in Venezuela that has some activity in South America and has a few members in the U.S. Trump, and briefly, so Trump has tried to say that Tren de Aragua and other gangs are terrorist organizations, which is not true. They are not in the business of terrorism, ideology, or politics, but they have been officially declared terrorist organizations. Then the Trump administration has said that there's a state of emergency in the U.S.-Mexico border, and it has used the powers of the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. So all that together, they think that they takes them in a place where the immigrants that they detain don't have due process. So they have railed people like Kilmer Armando Abrego from Maryland and many others for having a tattoo, even if they're just going to the everyday life or they're going for a check-in with ICE. They had kept them, and they have assumed that they are gang members without any due process and send them to places that are legal black holes or gray areas. Guantanamo, a month ago, and now to this prison in El Salvador, where they're not gonna go to any due process. And you're right, there are disappearances because the family members don't know about this, and it's happening overnight. Let me tell you real brief the story of one family that have been in touch with. This is Julio Zambrano Perez. He was Venezuelan. He left with his wife, Luz. They left Venezuela in 2018. They spent some years working in Peru. They were persecuted by gangs. They went to Chile. Then they came to the US legally. They entered under asylum in 2023. Then they went to their ICE appointment in January. The wife was pregnant, 9 months pregnant. They had a little girl. They were let go. But even though he was legally here with a work permit working in a restaurant in North Carolina, he was detained because he had a tattoo with his name in the hand with a crown, a tattoo he had for 15 years when he was 15 years old. He got it made. And then because of that, they said that he was a gang member. They had a bail hearing. He was denied. The baby was born. He could only meet the baby girl through the phone. And then on the morning of March 15, Saturday, he called the wife and said, "I'm going to be deported. I'm going to be sent back to Venezuela." Then the family didn't hear anything about him for 4 days. That's why they reached out to me and other people because he was disappeared. They called the government, they called ICE, they called the detention center where he was before, and they said he's been removed from the country. We cannot tell you anything else. They didn't know anything until on Thursday there was a list that CBS published with the names of some people sent to El Salvador, and he was there. But he was supposed to have his immigration date to make his case for asylum. He had letters from teachers, from employers that he was a good citizen on March 26th. But by that date, he was already sent in this prison for terrorists without any due process.
Attorney Mark Fancher, what do you make of this? Because we have had African Americans, we've had Black people, Professor Castaneda, who have sued. There's one gentleman I remember, he was walking through Beverly Hills and he was known, he lived there. And he was arrested. He took the case to the Supreme Court. You recall that case, Attorney Fancher? I mean, because who looks like an American? What does this mean?
Yeah, I think it fits into a different type of a context in this sense that Donald Trump has clearly studied the playbook and the methods of operating uh, dictatorships. He's very good at that. He has not studied the playbook for U.S. Uh, ways of conducting government. And the fact is that notwithstanding the repeated claims of American exceptionalism and the case that's often made that the U.S. is different, substantively, it has never been different from a dictatorship. It has just conducted their business in a very different style. So if you look at how the US has historically carried out its business, in order for it to present itself as being this different kind of democratic and fair, human rights oriented type of a society, it has never directly gotten its hands dirty by doing these kinds of things. It has always used proxies in order to do this for them. So that you had for many decades, particularly in Latin America, countries that were, derisively referred to as banana republics, where you would have someone who was almost sometimes a comical kind of a dictator, and it would be comical except for the fact that they were very often responsible for conducting terrible kinds of operations that caused the deaths of many people and the exploitation of many people. But these were not people who were functioning independently. These were proxies of the US. These were dictators who were set up in order to make conditions ripe for the exploitation of the resources of these countries and the workers in these countries by corporations that were based in the US. And so I can't remember the president, but one of them, in reference to one of these people, said, well, yes, he's an SOB, but he's our SOB. And so you had these people who were doing the dirty work for the United States. they were the ones who in their countries were doing the disappearances and the tortures and the incarceration without due process and all of that kind of thing. They were the ones that were doing it. And when it was necessary for more than that to be done, then they would have thug armies, or they would have these counterinsurgents who would uh, try and overthrow governments that were trying to make progressive change. You had the US doing all of these things through other people, through proxies, while at the same time standing erect on the world scene and saying, we're different. We respect human rights. We're fair and we're democratic and we respect the rule of law. So it's not that they weren't, the US was never doing these things, they were doing them all over the world, all through the global south, in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America. They were doing all of this dirty business, but using other people to do it. And one of the byproducts of that is that on a subconscious level, I think that many people probably began to believe that the only people who are capable of producing these types of brutal dictators are people of color. That you never saw these types of people in Western countries. That it was always brown and black people who produce these kinds of people. So if there's any silver lining to all of this, it is that at least on that level, Trump, who never read the playbook for governing the U.S. And who is governing directly in the way that the U.S. is always governed indirectly, is at least helping people to appreciate, well, white people can be dictators too. Uh,
Well,
and so, he's basically just doing what has been done historically in many countries. And, the primary crime of it, well, I won't say primary, but one of the major problems here is the absence of due process. That has at least been something that has been um, something that guaranteed, or if not guaranteed, at least provided an opportunity. It provided an opportunity for people to interrupt mistakes, so that in a case such as the one that we're talking about today, if this person is swept up and is accused of being a gang member who's subject to deportation, then there would at least be an opportunity for him to come forward to present evidence of the fact that he's not subject to this, that he should not be deported, and then it falls to a court or some other independent arbiter to make a decision that, oh, this is not one of those guys that you're trying to target. And that's what's been the great failing in these mass sweeps. And it has been all about just increasing Donald Trump's political capital and trying to maintain an image among his base and among others who are counting on him to make America great again by making America white again.
but indeed, we have Home Square in Chicago, Professor Castaneda. This is from the Chicago Police. Home Square is a CIA black site. It's based upon that. That's the model. And there are so many people who get disappeared and whose stories go down the black hole. That is why we have the George Floyd video, because a 17-year-old girl, Daniela Frazier, who was walking with her 9-year-old cousin, her lived experience by the time she was 17 years of age, she was not even of majority age, compelled her to tell her cousin to go in the store and wait for me. Do not come out until I come to get you. And she pulled out her phone and started filming. And so this is not unique in the American experience. This is, I mean, the Sandinistas, they're the United States. Gaddafi, no, I'm about to bring you in.
Okay.
Because, Gaddafi, that's Lumumba. I mean, we've been in all of these awful acts in history. And even when you go to Cuba, and I've been there, thank God, and I got a chance to go to the museum where Castro, and this was the museum this was more than 40 years ago, where he just showed you all the ways in which the CIA tried to kill him. It was, and I'm so glad that he established a museum because it was mine. James Bond had nothing on this, Professor Castaneda and Attorney Fancher. Nothing. Attorney Anastasi Senat, what do you make of this?
So I wanted to correct a couple of things that were put out there into the atmosphere. I am not familiar with this person specifically, but I am familiar with the story, and I'm familiar with the facts that the media has put out specifically of this person. And the reason why he became so popular is because of his specific story. Now, Kilmar Garcia entered the United States and he applied for asylum, okay? And asylum is the legal protection form, right, in the United States for individuals who fear persecution in their home country. And they can demonstrate that they either have a well-founded fear based on race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or a political opinion, that they cannot be returned to their home country, or that they've demonstrated there was a past persecution that occurred to them, which is why they cannot go back to their home country. In Kilmar Garcia's case, in the process of hearing his asylum claim, okay, the United States government accused him of being part of the MS-13 gang. An informant came in, indicated that he was. He denied that he was. So first clarification, it wasn't based on a lack of due process. He had it. He had an opportunity to be heard. He had an attorney and he was represented. And so he also knew of his hearing as far as the charges are concerned. So he had due process. Number two, that needs to be clarified. It wasn't based on tattoos. It was literally based on testimony that someone had brought in indicating that he was a gang member that he denied. Okay. But the other part that I think is important for people to understand is the United States government, despite the judge indicating that he may have been a part of the MS-13 gang, did grant him this asylum. They granted him protection from going back to his home country of El Salvador. Now, it was considered, from what I've read, an administrative error to which he was put on the plane with all these other Venezuelan people in order to be returned to El Salvador. Now, he is clearly in a prison in El Salvador. The United States knows where he is. The United States has every fund available in order to bring him back. They're declining to do so. The use of the Alien and Seditions Act of 1798 was lawful because it was never repealed, right? And so it's a wartime era law that came about when the United States was mad at France. But because this is the problem with why we need immigration reform, there's so many laws on our books, state-wise, federal-wise, that don't apply to how we live today. And they need to be repealed or overturned or clarified to match how we're living today. So when I guess it's the secretary, the correspondence secretary, Levitt, is that her name? Leavitt? You know who I'm talking about? I can't remember.
Press secretary, yes.
She's a corresponding secretary, right? She's the press secretary, right? So she was trying to say that now that he's been in El Salvador for these past 2 weeks, clearly he's not going to get harmed. But that's not the point. They're trying to argue that he's not going to get tortured, which he is being tortured because his hair has been shaved. He's in a max prison. He's not able to live his life. They're trying to say they're still following the 1951 refugee protocol. 1951, obviously. I wasn't born. I'm just going to assume none of you all were born in 1951. And then the 1967 protocols. I don't know if you all were born in 1967, but I'm putting out those years because I need people to understand how old some of this law is and has not been updated to 2025 circumstances. So in this situation, whether he applied affirmatively or he applied defensively, he did have due process rights, did have a hearing. He was granted protection, but the United States, quote unquote, had an administrative error, put him into this category of gangs that must be removed. And they're now trying to use these old laws to keep him out of the country. they really should put money into bringing him back safely, and El Salvador, of course, will allow him to go back safely. And I think that is the main problem, is the lack of understanding and the information that's being put out there by people who want to say it's only brown people or only Black people that are being targeted, because many Black people look Black, sound Black, quote unquote, right? But are actually Jamaican, Trinidadian, Haitian, and all the other stuff. People don't know who we are.
But you know, but
they're white.
Let me say this. You know, our own First Lady is a dual national, and no one is going after the Slovenians. And the people who are generally brought to the United States to seek asylum here have been working on behalf of the United States in their homelands. And what we do is we leave them behind to get tortured and killed when there has been a change in government. A change in
white people are being deported too. Ukrainians are being deported
now. No, I mean, but the Ukrainians were brought over here. That's a little bit different, because we do treat people of color differently.
We do. I'm not saying we don't. I'm just saying
Oh no, I'm hearing you, but I'm saying we have to be honest about our history, because the people and when you were, my sister really spent many of her formative years, my baby sister, in Washington. My parents also have a home in Washington. And we were laughing one day about some man just caught her eye as she was riding up Wisconsin Avenue, Professor Castaneda. And she said, he caught my eye. I don't even know why, but he did. And several days later, I was looking at the television and he was leading a coup. I had a professor at Howard who, it was very interesting. When I went in, people didn't, at least my presumption was that people did not know who my father was. I never was forward about that. But there was something about this professor's manner with me that indicated to me that he knew who he was and that he did not like him. That was fine. I just had to study and keep it moving. It turns out that he helped to lead the coup on our dear friend, Maurice Bishop. Ah. I said, this makes sense. Because in Washington, that's what you bump into in the DMV. And so I'm saying that while we're looking, I appreciate your analysis, and it's all true. Attorney Anastasia Sanat, brilliant analysis and so factual. And I appreciate your dotting the I's and crossing the T's. But the other piece, Professor Castaneda and Attorney Fancher, is that piece that we can't forget. Many of the people who were trying to run out of Afghanistan had been working on behalf of the government, the U.S. government, and they were running for their lives, because if they stayed behind, it was going to be a problem.
Well, Attorney Fancher said it. He said they're smarter this time around. They weren't so smart in the first term of the Trump administration, but they did their research. They did their homework this time around.
They had done their homework before, but they're playing a different game because they've been president before. And, but Professor Castaneda.
Yeah. Thank you, Attorney Senat, for the clarification. And you're absolutely right. Yes. So the case of Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia, which was the news this morning, he is indeed Salvadorian. And indeed, there was a claim that he was a gang member and he had due process. You're absolutely right. And then part of the problem here is that he was granted asylum. He's an asylee. He could become a green card holder and a citizen in the future. But even him was sent back, quote unquote, by accident. But as you were explaining, the whole point of having asylum or being accepted in the US as a refugee is one of the principles of international law is non-refoulement, that you cannot be sent back to a country who will be at danger. And the US government recognized that even if he had been a member of a gang, his life would be at risk of further violence from the state and other actors if he was sent back to El Salvador. And the US sent him back anyway. So that's a horrible precedent. What it has in common with many other cases, and I was talking about another guy, Julio Zambrano Perez, which is a different case, but he was sent probably in the same airplane as Kilmar to this prison in El Salvador. For the case of many cases of Venezuelans that we and the press has been following, most of those folks were denied due process. They never saw an immigration court. They were never given a chance to be approved or denied their asylum claims, or to be shown in a criminal or even an immigration court that they were even gang members. So I was confusing them or combining them, because what's in common is that this administration doesn't have any respect or support for asylum. People with asylum get deported. It's impossible to ask for asylum anymore at the border against US and international law. And people that are like Julio, in the process of applying for asylum, he has been removed to a third country. So that's something that they have in common that goes around against the rule of law in general and the protection of citizens, the presumption of innocence, and particularly profiling a certain look, a certain race, males, middle age, that have been profiled to be removed expeditiously to comply with these quotas about all the people that Trump wants to deport that are hard to find because they are parents, they are family members, they are working, so they are disappearing these innocent people so they can film these videos that we see in the news about they've been shaved by force, being walked down. This is a propaganda of a dictator type authority. Indeed, as Attorney Fancher was saying, by the Salvadorian government, but in order to instill fear in the U.S. population. Or Secretary of Homeland Security going to El Salvador and filming this video, putting fear on people that are here without documents, with prisoners from the Mara Salvatrucha behind her without the consent, being part of a video to say to throw away this argument. And the last one is this video of a few people, hundreds that were sent to Guantanamo, and again produce these horrible images that circulated to the media for a long time. Even while for a while there's no people in Guantanamo, they may send more people, but it's a fight with many flanks. But asylum is under threat. There's no refugees from anywhere in the world being accepted. There's going to be probably a travel ban targeting a lot of countries in the Caribbean, in Africa, and Latin America. So there is an exclusionary logic that we have had echoes about in the past.
Attorney Fancher, you have a response?
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that. And I think that the big problem is that, even if somewhere down the road in the past, someone has had due process, has had an opportunity to establish their status and any protection that they're supposed to receive, what's been happening with these deportations is that they're just sweeping people up now. I mean, even though they might have had due process in the past, when the government is going to take your life, liberty, or your property, then you need to have an opportunity yet again to demonstrate that they shouldn't do it. And so they're just shoving people on planes just based on, whoever, their appearance or tattoos or whatever it may be, and not giving them an opportunity to come in and to say, hey, hold up, you shouldn't be sweeping me up. But beyond that is that the other thing that Trump has studied in the dictator playbook is the idea of eliminating legal protection. And you see that he's not doing it just in the context of the deportations, but just generally with his attacks on law firms and lawyers, with his calls for the impeachment of judges. I mean, that's the way dictators operate. They destroy the legal system so that it doesn't provide the safeguard or the guardrails for people who otherwise are going to be, demolished by a regime that is looking to obtain total and complete power. And that's what we're seeing him do, is to do the same thing that any dictator has done historically, which is to destroy the legal system, to destroy a free media and anything resembling the protections that we enjoy under the First Amendment, to just lock down the state so that there can be total domination.
And I agree that these are signs that resemble other people. I think people have mentioned Hitler and Stalin having used the legal system in order to create a system where they can then operate it such that it is a dictatorship. But I think on the opposite side, right, the positive side of this is that the American public is now being aware of all of the flaws and holes in our legal system. They are now being more aware of the racist system to which immigration law was created way back in the day. I mean, United States was formed in 1776, and they're using a law from 1798 in 2025. Yeah, they can. Why? Because it was never repealed. So now we have to look at all of these laws, and we have to do what is called reform. Reform revise and make things better. And I think that's the message that the press should be articulating. These are legal loopholes that the president has been using in order to execute his plan, his mission. And so we need to shore up the loopholes. And the best way to do that is to find and elect people in Congress who are willing to shore up these loopholes, because they are the body that creates laws. They are the body that can say, for example, the Department of Education cannot exist. What he's doing is using a loophole in order to dismantle the Department of Education. But the truth is, the only people who have the power to dismantle it is Congress. So what we need to do as a community of Americans is to recognize the disparate impact of these loopholes and close them up, fix it.
But we have to, but you know what, Attorney Anastasia, we have to have the appetite for it. And that's where you have to watch the media, because the media's goal has been to divide. They work on behalf of the corporatocracy. That's who they are. And they have us working against each other, voting against our interests. I mean, you divide, when you divide, you can conquer.
Sure.
And so I think it's incumbent upon independent media and people who are adjacent to that system to change the appetite for this. Because in America, even people of color favor white people, such as the sickness of white supremacy and racism.
Mm-hmm.
And so these persons are less sympathetic than the Ukrainians, because that's my point. Ukrainians, we have sympathy for them, empathy for them. What did Malcolm X say? We become so sick in slavery that when the massa is sick, we say, "Massa, we sick." And when the massa gets well, we's well now.
Even worse.
But it's important to let the American people know the truth. It's not just black and brown people that are immigrants. There are Asian people that are immigrants.
No.
But the Chinese Exclusion Act from way back when.
I understand that, but the people who are absolutely who are discriminated against disproportionately are black and brown people. That's a fact, and the readily identifiable others. But in black and brown,
sure. I mean, if you just look at the executive order of the travel ban that Professor Castañeda brought up, obviously, black and brown.
No. But I'm just saying, stay right there for a minute, because I understand everybody comes here. But I'm sorry, let me not interrupt you, Mark. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I just was going to say, I think the thing that brings this into stark relief and makes it clear is not only did Trump sign an executive order saying that he wanted Afrikaners, white South Africans who were beneficiaries of and promoters of apartheid in South Africa for generations. Not only did he say that they were persecuted victims because Black people were just suggesting the idea that they reclaim land that was stolen from them, and he was saying that they're welcome to come into the United States, that he welcomes them as immigrants at a time when he's supposed to be excluding and deporting people. He wants them to come in, but it goes even further. Last night they reported that they opened up an office in South Africa to facilitate the processing of Afrikaners applications to come into the United States as immigrants. So what is it? Do we have an immigration problem where we've got too many people coming in and they want to get rid of people, but only the Black and brown people? We want the white racist people to come in.
I mean, that's actually just been the purpose of the entire immigration system since its inception. I think a lot of people don't realize that it's always been about white supremacy. It's never not been about white supremacy.
But I think we have to be honest that that's the American project, not just immigration.
Mm-hmm.
The American project America was built on indigenous land by Black people. But it was once our work was done, that's why they created Liberia. I mean, Lincoln did not even want Black people to stay here. You got to read Lerone Bennett's book, Forced into Glory. He wanted us out of here. He is quoted as saying, if I could maintain slavery and keep the Union together, I would do it. Bless his heart, but that's at the core, that is who we are. We are about the only people in history who remained where the enslaved people remained where we had been enslaved. Once our work was done, they tried to send us back out of here. It was Frederick Douglass and black folks who said, no, 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 we built this place. See,
Which is
now
so
that we're here.
the South Africans, the black South Africans built South Africa. Who do you think goes into the gold mines and pulls out the gold?
No,
they may not get any money from it.
No. But they were not delivered to South Africa. It is their homeland, and their lands were,
which is worse.
No, yeah, but I'm saying that's how indigenous people feel here. They got to, and so when they're there, when Elon Musk talked about the racist black South Africans who want their lands back. See, that's why they didn't like Mugabe. Because Mugabe's negotiation, unlike Mandela's negotiation, was give me my land and the vote. And I'm not shading Mandela because they're both great men. But they had but one is beloved by the West, one is vilified by the West. One is seen as
in the world do not even represent a 10% population.
There's 7% of the population.
7%.
They own 70%
all the brown
of the
and black
land.
people got together, there would be no such thing as white supremacy.
But that's
no longer
there'd be white supremacy. There'd be white supremacy, but we could fight it, and we still can. But what we have to do is acknowledge the whole history. I mean, I'm hearing you, and I'm glad we're having this kind of discussion because I think, Professor, this is what we need. We need to have this kind of discussion because I think
like you mean me?
Well, no. I'm saying all of us, but I'm shifting the question to the professor because the thing is, any of the four of us could be walking down the street, not talking. When I walk down Columbia Road in DC, everybody's speaking Spanish to me.
But you also know I'm a professor of immigration law. So when I come from this, I come from a very strong position.
I do too. And I do too, as an American citizen who has walked down the street, who's been mistaken for something else. I mean, as a black woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to remind my friends, well, more black people were sent to South and Central America than the United States. They're like, yeah, but. And I'm just saying to you, we're all vulnerable.
Yeah. No, it's an important discussion. I'm glad we're having it. And yes, to reunite and to remember all that we have in common. Because indeed, during the electoral campaign, there was this attempt to divide the electorate by racist tropes, that the Latinos were the criminals, that the Asians are the good immigrants at some points, although during the pandemic, it was the China virus. And then these horrible stereotypes about Haitians with eating cats and dogs, completely falsehoods, the lie of the year, to again try to bring these racist tropes. But indeed, we are all disproportionately being profiled by police, tons of data about that, and also by immigration authorities. And it's not by accident. Unfortunately, there's a lot of evidence that MAGA has indeed this white Christian nationalist component. It's openly stated as such in Project 2025. Stephen Miller, one of the big proponents of these policies, that has been finding these loopholes in old laws to excuse this harsh treatment of some foreign-born populations. They have an agenda of keeping America white, keeping America white supremacy, and trying to decrease the number of people of color coming to the U.S. But it's African Americans are not going anywhere. Latinos that have been here for generations are not going anywhere. Whiteness is not under threat. American culture is not under threat. The English language is not under threat. Immigrants may speak other languages, but they also learn English. And my kids and my grandchildren are going to have that as their first language. So it's a very misplaced fear from the part of some white voters, but it's been part of the electoral discourse. So it's good that we talk about this. Although, I agree also with the Attorney Senate, it's not unique to black and brown people, although they are preponderantly attacked. But a lot of Ukrainians came to special programs, but many of them are losing also the private protective status because they were not resettled refugees from Ukraine because they were happening quickly. Some of them had a special United for Ukraine and other things, but some of them had TPS. And Donald Trump also ended that program from this very independents, Republicans, Democrats were very favorable to opening the door to Ukrainians with no questions asked. Even some of them, and some Afghans that also had a very sympathetic view, are going to also lose their status. And it's a good time to do a cross-racial coalition right now, because we see Canadian tourists, Canadian business owners, Canadian actresses being stopped in the border in Mexico and being searched, their telephones scanned for political information, French scientists, so even white Europeans and our Canadian neighbors, white, are also being victims, for some of them for the first time, to this profiling and questioning of that they have the right to visit or to study or to marry or to move into the US. So I think a lot of people are waking up to that thing, that it's a horrible life for an undocumented person to be always fearing an arrest that may end up being sent to a place that they escaped for a good reason, that they may be separated for the family for a long time. I think with these stories of the guy from Maryland and the Venezuelans being sent to El Salvador and other stories that we've been talking about, hopefully we can create more empathy across communities in the US, that is not only about brown illegal people, quote unquote, that are breaking the law, but that this is something to take away at critics, at intellectuals, at anybody that is speaking against the regime, that this is something about concentrating power indeed. It goes unfortunately beyond our horrible immigration law system. This is another example of decrease of democratization and an attempt of concentrating power in the hands of the executive.
And we have to be a nation of laws, not men and women, because when we were favoring the Ukrainian conflict, we opened the doors to them. Now that this is falling more into disfavor, we shut the door. Now, either we're going to have an open door policy or not. So I mean, to that extent, you and Attorney Sanat are correct. But walking down the street, no, I mean, we've been here almost 500 years, because Black people came here on the Spanish part of this American project. I never thought I'd live long enough to hear a white man be told that he needs to go back to Africa. But what can I tell you?
Right, that was interesting.
I don't know. I've lived a long time, and here we are. But you know what?
I think Professor Castaneda brought up a good point. Jasmine Mooney, the Canadian actress who was coming back to the United States to renew her work visa, was detained for 12 days by ICE and then subsequently removed to Canada. Not only is she white, but she's considered beautiful, and she was treated, because of her Canadian citizenship, as if she were, quote unquote, a brown or Black person.
But you know what, Anastasia, wait a minute. You know what happens? You know the old saying. When white people get a cold, Black people have pneumonia. See, if you don't cure the problem, eventually I'm going to die, and white folks will get pneumonia, and then everybody's going to die. I'm not saying that white people are immune. I'm saying you feel it most acutely in the Black and brown communities and in the indigenous communities, and when you are progressive. But eventually it sweeps everybody up. I'm hearing you, because the most visa overstays in the United States are Canadians. So it's like, we're at this crossroads in the American Republic. We've got some profound questions to ask and answer about who we are. Because at the beginning of this project, they wanted George Washington to be a king. He said no. So this royalist pull toward a monarchy, which became the oligarchy, that's in us, as is this search for freedom and equality. So it's just it's part of the back and forth that we do. But I only have about 5 or 6 more minutes left, and I'm going to get closing thoughts from each of you. And I'm going to start with you, Attorney Sanat.
Okay, I want to say that based on that point that you just raised, they're trying to get a third term allowed through a convention of the states. 27 states have agreed to the convention. They need, I think, about 8 more states in order to have the convention, and they'll need a total of 38 in order to ratify the Constitution. I don't believe that it's going to happen, but just assume that it does happen. That means President Obama can come back and run again. So maybe the American people, even if they do agree to a third term, they might be able to still get rid of this ideology that has been purported by this current administration by electing someone that they've trusted in before. And I can just imagine how much more benefits can rise from that. And I think we need to consider that if we're going to do something like that, we need to consider the ramifications of these actions. So if there are people that are running for Congress and you don't believe that immigration reform is necessary, these are the examples that need to be brought forth. Number two, I want to make sure that everyone knows reparations to these countries that we've infiltrated and we have made disabled by our actions need to be addressed. Foreign policy issues are important. For example, Haiti, of course. I'm going to bring up Haiti. We need to make sure that these Haitians don't leave the tropical island that they are so accustomed to in order to go to small town Springfield, USA, in order to rebuild Springfield, Ohio, USA. They don't want to leave their country. They don't want to go into the winter. They don't want to have to start from scratch. They want to stay in their country. So as American people like myself, it's important that we know about what is going on so we can get it changed and elect people that will change it.
Attorney Mark Fancher.
Well, I as anybody who's heard me talk before knows that I'm a revolutionary. I think that most of these problems are not reformable. They're not fixed by tinkering. We need to just start and do something completely different. And sometimes the things that seem most outrageous make the most sense. Kwame Ture used to say that the way to resolve poverty or to solve it is to look at the problem that poor people have. The problem that they have is they don't have money. So give them some money. It sounds ridiculous and stupid, but it makes good common sense. And I think that when we're talking about immigration, all of these problems exist simply because we have decided that the concept of borders makes good sense. Eliminate all borders, all of them. Because if you really stop and think about it for a minute, we don't really need them. If we needed them, then we would need to have visas and passports to go from state to state within the United States. But what happens is that people move freely about the states without any problems. They relocate into states. And if, for example, people in Illinois decided that they wanted to go into Indiana in large numbers and live, nobody's going to say, well, you can't come. Those governments would just try and figure out how do we accommodate all of this. And those in Illinois who are losing the population would say, we've got to do something to stop the exodus of these people. We've got to make it more attractive for people to stay in Illinois. And if you do that on a global basis, all of these things would work out. I mean, just let people go where they want to go. And then you won't have all of these headaches. And people might dismiss that as being ridiculous, but it's not. It makes perfect sense. And it's just and it's moral, particularly given the fact that with respect to the United States, the borders that were erected, nobody gave the US government permission to put them up in the first place. The territory, the entire United States territory, is stolen territory. These were illegal immigrants that came from England and took over territory and engaged in a process of genocide. So they're the last ones who should be standing up talking about illegals and talking about people coming where they're not supposed to be. They never should have come. If ever a wall should have been built, it should have been built by the First Nations when they saw the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria coming across the ocean.
Help me, Holy Ghost. Professor Ernesto Castaneda, who American University Director of the Center for Latin American and Latino Studies, you have the final word here.
Thank you so much. Such an honor to be with all of you today. Just to recap, as Attorney Senat was saying, most people don't want to leave their homes. Most Americans these days, if they don't go to college, they stay in their counties and they spend the rest of their lives there, and they have the right to do so. Because of that, if we open borders more openly, like Attorney Fancher was saying, there wouldn't be that much more movement that we see today. So we shouldn't be afraid of that. We shouldn't obsess over national borders. Even Trump seems to understand that when he talks about the artificial line drawing a map between Canada and the US. He's very clear that we don't need a wall there, and he has ambitions there. Briefly talking about the third term for the Trump administration. It's a distraction, I think, from the recession that we're seeing, the tariffs, the collapse, that the economic inflation and depression that mass deportations and the decrease of immigration is going to cause on this country. But it's also a symptom of the erosion of democracy, because the leaders that talk about this staying in power for life are dictators, right? We had presence of this happening in Russia with Putin, with Castro, with Cesar Chavez in Venezuela, with others that had clung to power. Even in El Salvador, he wasn't supposed to be reelected. He did some funny things around the constitution so that the president of Salvador, Bukele, could come back in a second mandate, and it's not a democracy down there. So this is worrisome. So in a perfect world, Obama will have a chance, but it's not only they're changing the law to favor them, and they're doing a lot of tricks, so it wouldn't be just necessarily a clear and open election. So to finish, going back to the topic where we started, the U.S. sent Salvadorians that had given asylum. They sent Venezuelans that hadn't really gone to due process. Maybe they sent a few gang members indeed to El Salvador. We don't know. We know they sent women, and the Salvador didn't accept them. They sent them back again right away. So in the same way, it's not true. We shouldn't believe when the spokespeople for the White House say that they cannot bring back the people they sent to El Salvador. Yes, they can. They are there on they're paid $6 million in El Salvador to host these folks for us, for the U.S. So they should be brought back to the U.S. mainland, follow the process, maybe give them compensations, probably giving them a pathway to citizenship, because all that they have suffered and their families being separated. Remember, the family members are U.S. citizens, they have U.S. citizen children, and that's not the way that we're supposed to be. So we should keep the attention on these cases to put pressure, and if something Donald Trump hates is that the media criticizes his policies for a long time. So we keep this pressure on this topic. I think eventually these people will be brought back from El Salvador, and that's a way to slow down and to cool a little bit of this lawlessness that is happening on purpose and can only get worse. Thank you, everyone.
Well, and I will say this. You're as Spanish as I am English. You're indigenous, and you're indigenous to this part of the world. We are not. Attorney Sanat, Attorney Fancher, and we come from Africa. We were brought over here. That's why we need to be very, very careful, Solomon. You said this Hispanic guy should go to South America and rebuild those failed nations. No, he should be right where he is. This is his home. We're in his home. This is the home for indigenous people. See, that's why I'm very keen on getting this story right. And stop doing that. Everybody has the right to be here. Everybody. If you seek asylum, yeah, you have the right to be here. He has as much right to be here as Melania Trump has to be here, as Ivana Trump had to be here. When Donald Trump met them both, they were not citizens. Nobody's taking any umbrage with that. Let's just stop it. Stop. And stop talking about who belongs where. These borders were created for the purposes of colonialism, of taking the resources of indigenous peoples. That's the reality. He is indigenous to this land. All indigenous, indigenous people, and they're indigenous to this land. They're indigenous to the Americas. They are. We're not, but we're all here. My father often says that we came over here on different ships, but we're in the same boat now. Here it is. So let's work it out. Work it out. Much love to all of you. Professor Castaneda, you came a guest. You're leaving family. You have a home here.
Thank you so much.
Santita Jackson Show, AM 950 Radio. Let's talk about these elections, everybody. Got to talk about them. Boy, oh boy, they are of tremendous consequence. Here on the Santita Jackson Show, AM 950 Radio. Back in just a moment.